Hey guys, welcome to interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with the patch 4.2b rundown. So this is pretty exciting because they said that this is actually the last balance patch of the Playum update. So what this means basically is that the next patch is going to be somewhere around the middle of July, because we know that on July 20th the Soul Fighter event starts and Neela is going to be released. So this patch is going to last roughly about 2 weeks as per usual, maybe 3 weeks, but yeah, we'll see how it goes, but that's quite exciting. So there's no 4.2C, it's only up till B, which does happen from time to time. Anyways, let's jump straight into the meat of it. So first up we have Aatrox getting his ulti buffed by 10% each rank. I believe that he got nerfed in this way before when he was very dominant. Now I do see him a lot less, and I don't think he's that I actually do think that he's pretty strong, but I can definitely feel why they're giving him this buff. So I guess this will make him, of course, a little bit better in team fights or like 1v1s where you of course pop your ulti. So Ashe, this is a really interesting one. They want her to be a ADC. They don't want her to be like a support or a top laner or anything like that. So what they're doing to force you to play Ashe ADC is your non-critical slow damage is getting reduced by pretty much at 5% in all ranks. What this means is if you're building support like Imperial Mandate, Serpent's Fang and stuff like that, Black Cleaver, you're not going to crit and you're going to be slowing for less. Then furthermore, they're increasing the attack damage bonus by 15% on her volley, which is her W, and they're also increasing its cooldown. So what this means is, of course, you're going to be able to spam volley less, and this is the second cooldown nerf volley has got. I think the last one was like 2 patches ago. So you're going to be able to spam your volley less, and Ashe support is going to get even worse. And finally, to put the nail in the coffin, your cooldown on the Enchanted Crystal Arrow is actually going up in the early stages of the game. I'm not sure how this helps crit Ashe, and it affects all versions of Ashe. And the ability power bonus is going from 100% to 40%. That's a huge AP nerf. Of course, only Ashe supports actually builds AP. Normally, it's from the Imperial Mandate, or of course from other AP items you could build. Like you could technically build Iron Sensor as well as Staff of Flowing Water, although it's not really common. But normally from your Imperial Mandate, your AP is going to get destroyed. So you're not going to do a lot of damage with the arrow anymore. Not that you really would anyways previously. But yeah, so they're trying to force Ashe into being an ADC. Now my personal thoughts and predictions is I still think Ashe support will be good. And I say this because I think Ashe's kit as a whole just has way too much utility. So even though you're getting 5% less slow, a 15% slow at like early levels and like a 25% slow at late levels is still going to be really strong. Even though you can cast your volley a little bit less, like you get 2.5 seconds extra cooldown with a little bit of ability haste and such, yeah, you still have a longer cooldown on volley, but it's not going to be so bad. On the Ashe arrow, the cooldown affects both her support and her crit variant, so it's not really pushing you to crit. And the damage on your arrow doesn't matter because you're playing support, so I still think support Ashe is going to be okay. I still think it's going to be good. Camille, they once wanted to nerf her out of jungle, now they're actually trying to get her back into the jungle. They're giving her more damage to monsters on her E to make her, on her W to make her kill it faster. Now I'm not too sure, I haven't really seen Camille jungle in ages, so I'm not too sure how her clear is now, and I'm not sure how good it's going to be, so I don't have too much to say about this. Now Draven's base AD is going down by 4. In my opinion, 4 AD is not a lot. However, for some Draven mains or people who play Draven, they couldn't be able to feel this change, but the damage per level is going up by 0.5. So at level 15, you're gonna get extra 7 AD, which is more in the late game, but it's barely anything. Draven's still gonna fall off. So overall, I think that these two changes both don't mean very much at all. Now Fiora is really interesting. The cooldown on her lunge is getting reduced by 2 seconds. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but this was like I think a year or a year and a half ago where Fiora was the strongest champion in the game, permanently picked in Baron lane and even in the jungle because of how strong she was. And the main way that they nerfed that was to nerf her range on her Q and her cooldown on her Q. Now of course they're probably never going to revert the range change, but the cooldown on her Q getting lower means that Fiora could possibly be very good again, and also the cooldown return on skill hit, however, I should say, the cooldown return on skill hit is being reduced from 60 to 50% to compensate for the buff here. So overall it's a slight buff to Fiora, we'll have to see how it goes. Fizz His E is getting a 10% AP ratio increase. However, in compensation, his passive damage to monsters is being lowered. So Fizz Jungler is going to remain the same. However, Fizz Mid is going to be a little bit stronger. I personally think Fizz is a very weak champion in both roles overall. I don't think 10% AP is gonna help him to a point that he's gonna be in the meta. So we'll have to see how it goes. But I think he's gonna be stronger, obviously. However, he's not going to be meta. And here we have Lilia. Lilia early game skirmishing needs a little bit of work, so they're giving her 4 extra AD and 3 extra armor. This should indeed help her a little bit, like in skull fights or in early game fights. But once again, Lilia is not made for early game fights, so you probably don't want to be fighting in the early game anyways. But if you do, this is going to be very helpful. Nunu and Willump getting a buff here. Each snowball is going to do 2 extra damage, as well as his ulti cooldown being lowered slightly by 5 seconds at all ranks. Again, this just helps Nunu by a little bit, but I think he's in a decent spot. He's a little bit of a weird champion to play. So for people who already play him, they still are, and for people who don't play him, they probably won't. But yeah, so Nunu is just in an okay spot at the moment. Olaf, the shield he's getting from his new W is actually getting reduced in terms of the missing health ratio from 17 to 13, but on base it's getting a little bit higher. Overall, this should mean his shield is slightly smaller, but this shouldn't affect too much. Now, his ulti is where the real change comes in. The initial duration from 3 is going to 4 seconds. However, in compensation, the base damage attack boost is actually going down by 5 at all ranks and down by 5%. Now, in my opinion, this is actually good because sometimes you need to pop your ulti to run someone down, and to keep your ulti up, you have to be attacking them. So sometimes it takes 3 seconds to reach them and you run out of ulti, which is kind of bad. So in my opinion, this is a good change. To sacrifice a little bit of damage for a little bit of extra initial duration, I think it's fine. But on the flip side, if you're in a scenario where you're already on top of them and then you ult, you're kind of losing a lot of damage for no good reason here, which is a little bit tragic. But in my opinion, personally, I think that this is overall a good change and makes Olaf easier to play. So Rammus, of course, is a huge counter to the current ADC meta. So what they're doing is they're, of course, nerfing his movement speed on his passive by quite a fair bit, especially in the early game, and they're also nerfing his base damage on his Q. Now, personally, I think Rammus is extremely strong, but I have a very biased opinion because I'm an ADC main, and I'm playing against Rammus kind of sucks. So especially in the ADC meta, Rammus is getting so much value. So I do think that nerfing Rammus does of course make sense, and he's been a menace in my games at the very least. Swain is getting nerfed. I actually think Swain is in an okay spot. I don't think that he's too strong, but I don't think he's too weak either. But apparently he's been a little bit too strong. So they're nerfing his armor per level by 0.5. So he's gonna get 7 less armor when you reach max level. I think this is not too big of a change. His Q damage is actually going to be reduced by 5 at all ranks, and AP ratio is going down by 3%. And his ulti healing per second is actually going down in terms of base amount as well as 3% AP. So overall, the thing about Swain is, if you build damage, you're not actually that tanky. If you build tanky, you don't actually deal that much damage. So they're hitting both his damage on his Q and his tankiness on his ulti. So they're hitting both aspects of Swain, which is really interesting because this is like a double whammy to Swain. I think that Swain is already in an okay spot, and this nerf, I don't know if it's going to make him weak, but I guess we'll have to see how it goes. Personally, I still think Swain is going to be pretty strong, because I think that the main thing that makes Swain strong is the fact that people are bad at playing against him, and not the fact that his kit is actually overpowered or overtuned. I think it's just that people aren't very good at playing against Swain. But Swain's popularity has dropped quite a bit already, so that is something. He's no longer the newest champion, so his popularity has dropped a little bit as well. But overall, I still think Swain is going to be in an okay spot. Tristana is getting some interesting changes. Her base health is going down by 40, so in the early game, it's a little bit easier to kill, which kind of sucks because Tristana's level 2 and level 3 is really important for all ins, so it's quite a big nerf to Tristana. Her Q, however, is getting buffed, so every point you put into it, you're actually getting more attack speed than previously. However, you're sacrificing a lot of safety because you can see that her rocket jump cooldown is getting increased by 2 seconds, 1 second, and it's actually getting buffed at the late game, but you max this last, so you're going to be stuck on 22 seconds for a long time. So I think this is a pretty big nerf overall. to Tristana in terms of her early game because of her rocket jump and her base stats as well. But in the late game, she's going to be way stronger because of the buff to technically both her rocket jump and her rapid fire. But I think Tristana's early game is very important because you need to get fed early game to scale well into the late game. If you're behind, you scale well, but it's really slow. And Tristana, in my opinion, is a champ you have to kind of be ahead on. You can't really be behind on Tristana. So this is kind of a big nerf to Tristana overall. Now Vayne is getting a base stats nerf as well by 30 and an armor nerf of 4, pretty much making her laning a little bit weaker, but her condemn is getting an AD ratio increase. So basically just making her laning weaker, and I think that this is targeted at like Vayne in the Baron lane or Vayne in the mid lane, because they kind of want you to have a support to help you out instead of trying to play 1v1 lanes, which I think overall on ADC Vayne this won't affect her too badly, and I think that it affects Baron and mid lane Vayne a lot more, which I think is what they're aiming for. Ziggs base damage on his, I think this is his Q, is going up by 10 at all ranks, I think again, so they really think Ziggs isn't doing well. I think he just got buffed last patch as well. His satchel charge cooldown is going down in the early stages of the game. You max this last, so this is pretty huge buff. And the time your E stays on the ground is going up by 0.5 seconds to 2 seconds. And this is basically reverting all of the Ziggs nerfs. Now, mark my words, I think Ziggs will become meta and Ziggs will become strong again really soon, because last time Ziggs was the strongest mid laner, they nerfed all of these aspects of Ziggs. Now they're pretty much reverting all the nerfs at one go from last patch and this patch. So I think Ziggs is going to be really strong really soon. So gameplay changes, Dem's Dance healing is increased by 2% because fighters aren't very strong at the moment. I kind of agree, ADCs are really strong, tanks are doing pretty alright, assassins are doing pretty well as well, but fighters are not doing too hot, so I think this kind of makes sense. Now Hullbreaker has a bunch of interesting changes. Now the TLDR of these changes is, you're getting less defenses in the early stages of the game because they don't want Hullbreaker to be like a defense item as a first item, which is what a lot of people do, like Garen for example, like Jace for example. They use it as a defense item instead of using it as a split push item. They don't want that. So your base amounts and lower levels is going to get decreased by a lot. Same goes for minions. But the big change here is magic resistance. So you can see magic resistance from 10 to 50 is now 10 to 20. And same thing for like ranged champions over here. And same thing for minions. You can see that minions magic damage is also, magic resist is also 170 to 85 now. And here it's like 85 to 40. So this is gonna make it such that Hullbreaker is nerfed big time. Like this means that if you have a mage with like very strong wave clear, let's say like I don't know, like an Ahri, maybe even a Corki, somebody that does magic damage, the minions aren't gonna be so tanky anymore. So this is a pretty big nerf to Hullbreaker in my opinion. It's a really big nerf. I'm not sure why they really made this change, but I really don't know. It's just a pretty huge nerf to split pushing. I don't think split pushing was a very common strat anyways, and it's kind of very specific, so I don't really know why they chose to target it so much, but it's definitely going to be a huge nerf to Hullbreaker in terms of both the user and the split pushing. So yeah. Randuin's is getting a 200 cost increase, but you're getting 5 extra armor and more determination stacks, which basically translates to more healing. Serpent's Fang is getting a 3 lethality buff, and I think that what they're doing here makes a lot of sense because Serpent's Fang is normally not a first item because Youmuu's exist. It's normally a second item, and now they want Serpent's Fang to be able to be built as a first item because of how much shielding there is in the game. I think this is logical, but I kind of hate it as an ADC main. I'm gonna get assassinated a lot more, but overall, I think that this is a very logical change. On the flip side, Youmuu's Ghostblade is actually getting a 200 gold price increase, but you're getting 5 extra AD, which is I think pretty alright. I think Youmuu's is a pretty cheap item anyway, and I don't think costing a little bit more is going to be too much of an impact. So some upcoming skins, and that's pretty much it for this patch. I'm looking forward to, of course, discussing the future patch of 4.3 to talk about Nilah as well as the Soul Fighter update. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and goodbye.